We're going to be talking about open source AI and specifically Ireland's opportunity here, a strategic discussion on how Ireland can position itself in the context of the global open source AI innovation ecosystem. I'm going to hand you over now to our indomitable moderator, Kathryn Lynch.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the Graveyard Shift. We promise to keep you entertained, informed, and hopefully go home either thick or at least with a plan for Monday. So my name's Kathryn Lynch. I am the co-chair of a network called Innovate Ireland, and specifically I am mostly and primarily interested in the wider definition of innovation, how it will build resilience in our economy to strengthen SME effectiveness and productivity, and also how we can position Ireland as the island of innovation. But I guess for today's conversation, I'm very excited to be here knowing absolutely nothing about either AI or open source anything, because I think last year I was remembered for thinking that open source was a cult. But here we are. And we are living in, shall we say, interesting times. And Ireland finds itself uniquely positioned between the forgiveness model and the permission model. And I think sometimes that makes us a bit schizophrenic. But today, ably assisted by the business, the brains, the support, and the money, I have a fantastic panel to talk about where Ireland can strategically play. We're not going to gloss over some of the glaring challenges that we have. We are a small island. We have heretofore capitalized for good and bad on our position uniquely between the US and Europe. It's probably, in my view, time to pick a horse. And that will be also not without its challenges. But today I want to just briefly invite the panel to introduce themselves, what their position is on are we forgiveness or are we permission, and what the next steps will be in your organisation. I look forward to the chat.
How do you follow up an introduction like that? I thought at one point you were going to introduce the world's worst boy band, and we have the stools, but we don't have the key change to go with that. My name is Paul Browne. I have two hats on, probably reflected in my clothing choices today. One is I've been committing to open source for the last 25 years, in particular the Drules open source rules project. My day job is with Enterprise Ireland, so we're all working with Irish companies to promote exports and jobs. And my job within that, best job ever for the last couple of years, has been scaring the living daylights of Irish companies to get them off the fence on both cybersecurity and AI. Do you want me to follow up and answer the question, or we'll pass on?
Yeah, we get to the questions.
Yeah. Great, thanks very much. My name is Noel O'Connor. I'm a professor at the School of Electronics Engineering. Actually, for the last 5 years, I've been sick. It's not on.
Yeah, we'll pass it on.
Oh, sorry, pass on. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I think you can. But you could hear me, Gar, anyway, yeah. Sorry, I'm Noel O'Connor, a professor in the School of Electronic Engineering in DCU, but for the last 5 years, 5.5 years now, I've been seconded out of that role to act as CEO for the Insight Research Ireland Centre for Data Analytics. That's one of the largest publicly funded research centres in Ireland, with a focus on all things data related, including AI. As the token academic on the panel, I'm not sure into which category I fall. It's certainly not the money one. But I suppose what I can say in terms of open source, it's a key strategy within academia now in terms of living up to our mission and our ethical responsibility in conducting open science. And I don't think that we could claim to be leading in open science nationally or internationally unless we are adopting the open source paradigm, particularly as it relates to AI.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Durcan. I'm the Chief Technologist within IDA Ireland. So my role is very much working with multinational companies, predominantly a lot of FDI from the US. I also write around from a global perspective in Europe and Asia. And I work very much, my own background is in the world of machine learning and AI. And so I engage with companies very much looking at the cutting edge of research and development. So I get to see at the forefront of pretty much what's coming down the tracks. So that's really useful within that perspective that's there. And one thing I could definitely say is we're starting to see a bigger kind of focus on using open source, I think, as the world of AI is coming in, opportunities within that as well. So looking forward to the discussion.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ivan Jennings. I, like Paul, have two hats on here today. I'm one of the co-founders of AI Squared, which is an initiative to drive greater adoption of AI in Ireland. My day job is with a company called Red Hat, who are the world's largest open source company. So I'm 100% behind open source and what it can do. It's fundamentally required for us here in Europe as we move into the year of AI, and we must adopt it. We must use it. What were the two terms you used? Asking for permission or looking for forgiveness? I'm somewhere in between. I'm not too sure. But we're at a point where we need to make a call on that.
And to that end, where do you think we are uniquely strengthened, but also uniquely vulnerable in this rapidly changing world? Is it skills? Is it our attitude? Is it our culture? Is it our, this is a model that we know well, our current business model, and are we prepared for the disruption that's inevitable?
Yeah, so I'm as fearful as I am excited about the kind of next phase of where we're going. If we look at skills, right, for me, skills is as much about how we educate our teenagers and put them through college and really equip them with technical skills. But I also look at our primary school children and the infrastructure that they don't have in their classes to be able to compete with the United States or Korea or other places like that. The other thing I think that concerns me is how we probably over-promote our success. We've got very large companies in this country who talk about how well we're actually doing when we're not, right? The level of adoption in AI is not 85% of SMEs. It's absolutely not. So I think we need to be very honest about where we are and where we're not and tackle where we're not.
And to that point, I have a particular interest in supporting SMEs. And Paul, effectively what we heard today is open source can be a great leveler. But if I'm an SME in Galway, I technically have the same opportunity and advantage as a larger multinational. But a lot of our policy responses are built for the larger corporates and the SMEs, either in terms of skills, abilities, or scaling capital, is a real struggle. So what and how are the enterprise agencies moving to support that opportunity?
I'll take the microphone off you to answer it. So there's a couple of themes there, and to loop back around and to answer your question. In some ways, we've known the challenges that we're facing, in particular this year onwards. It's part of the reason why Enterprise Ireland was set up more than 25 years ago. We have been spectacularly successful on foreign direct investment. Enterprise Ireland with the Irish companies have grown to almost an equivalent size. So we've been preparing for this for 25 years. Your question then was around policy, and obviously a lot of the attention goes to large companies, and that's natural because they're there, they've got presence, they're very articulate. So a lot of the work that we're doing is, and across all sectors, not just the technology companies, just getting companies to take that first step. So it isn't even modifying the policy response, although in due course we need to do that. It's just getting companies to think about that. What's my first step? Because I would disagree with something that was said in a previous panel where went around and three quarters of that, the previous panel were very positive about AI, and they should be. And I think most people in this room, because you're here, you're curious, it will be a good story. But there is a negative impact. It's not going to affect everybody equally. And if you're not paying attention to it as a company, you are going to get impacted.
And that, but to that point, though, the vast majority of businesses haven't even moved on a digitalization journey, never mind an AI journey. You may as well be speaking Greek.
I think maybe to bring a little positivity to the conversation. I think Ireland, from a research and innovation perspective, is actually in a great place, thanks to investments from Enterprise Ireland and the support of the IDA around FDI and Research Ireland previously, Science Foundation Ireland, right? Because there actually are a lot of supports for SMEs in particular. We have the Enterprise Ireland Technology Centre, CEDAR being the big AI centre there. We now have 4 European digital innovation hubs in Ireland, who are designed specifically to support those companies who haven't even embarked on their digital transformation journey yet. And then you have the research centres, the Research Ireland centres, which bring scale for working either with SMEs or multinationals, but also for developing the talent pipeline. If I had one criticism, and I have many, but because it's a lot done more to do, I guess, but it's not sufficiently joined up, right? And that's the problem, right? And that shouldn't be the case in a country the size of Ireland, where actually we have a track record internationally for working well with each other, interdisciplinary, interinstitutional, interbusiness, you name it. So there's a job of work to be done to better align the ecosystem. And if we can crack that, then I think it'll be a thing of beauty for SMEs.
Indeed. John, question for you. When you're now talking to your clients who are outside the island of Ireland, cast forward 5, 10, 15 years, what's going to be Ireland's calling card?
Oh, wow. Okay, I've looked that far ahead. So I guess the big angle that we've been working with in IDEA is kind of looking ahead into the future. And around that perspective is very much about the position in which companies are going to go through that change. So we're starting to see some of we've introduced digital transformation as kind of a core piece within that, and not just in tech, but very much like, I suppose, if you think about manufacturing, like the manufacturing world is going to look very different, right? So that's a challenge. So skills and uptraining is going to be massive in that area. We look at engineering. I think engineering is probably one of the really interesting sectors. They've kind of been on this journey maybe earlier than some of the others, like life science and med tech and so on, because they now, you see robotics has been a big piece where that's coming in. But now what we're starting to see is that fusion of AI and robotics and automation. So when we look ahead into like the next few years and where we're going, I think what you're going to see is a huge amount of automation, a huge amount of more kind of process with governance, but with where the AI is driving that, but within the people managing it at the same time. So, but the problem with that is that's a huge difference to skill sets. Like we look at the moment and what's there, how are you going to bring people on that journey? What new skills are they going to need? That's a big challenge. So we're working with them at the moment and with the universities and trying to identify that. When I look out the sectors, I would say the big change we will probably see is in manufacturing. We're going to see a lot more of automation. We're going to see more of those kind of 24/7 kind of cobot relationships, I think is fair to say. But that's a new skill set for everybody that has to have. We're going to start seeing people then very much in the services side is going to be where you're looking at agentic AI, a lot of automation that's going to be in the side. What does that look like? There's a lot of challenges already. And we talked about today, just earlier on, about that idea, that already agents can do stuff on your behalf. What does that look like? Where will that go? How are you going to deal with that? So for me, I think one of the big challenges we really want to do with companies is we're pitching ahead into the future, looking at is that it's for a modern structure with education that has core with skills, but very much, and I think this is important, and it came up in the conversation just in the previous thing. How do you get the skills for the critical thinking rather than it just purely for an implementation piece? I think the analogy was like, I copy paste, I put it in, and I've got 100%. Industry doesn't work like that. Industry has real world problems. Every day you run into something. You need critical thinking, and so if you don't have some part of that skills, and I think that's a challenge for the education system coming through. But we're seeing that like that's the direction already that's going. So my vision for the future is going to be a very much skills focused piece and building on that with a huge amount of automation coming in and a lot of places where AI is going to be at the core within that. But I do think there will still be more where it's a tool to help people rather than a full replacement. That's kind of what we're saying.
Can I just ask you, if you were, open source is global.
Yes.
They're not going to be in Ireland necessarily. You're going to look for the best talent for your business. Where are you going to find them?
I wouldn't necessarily worry about the location of the people. What would concern me is, and I'm an optimist, by the way, just so we're clear before I say what I'm about to say. We've a huge software development community here in Ireland and globally. And when I think about what agentic AI can do, and I look at open source projects, which can essentially build a project for you now and produce all of the artifacts and test cases and edge cases, and essentially remove the need for 50 developers. How many software engineers have we got in Ireland? Many, many thousands. My question would be, where do we redeploy these people to? The other thing I would ask would be around third level education. AI has just posed massive questions around how we influence curriculums. So we're teaching technology that's out of date tomorrow. So I think we need to focus better on being better learners than actually the things that we're learning, and what that makes us look like in 5 years' time. I'm not too sure, but we need to really think through where we redeploy these people, right?
I mean, I will say that the universities have responded excellently to the existential crisis of ChatGPT, and we'll never be able to assess students ever again. And there's huge work going on in the universities to change how we do our evaluation and do our assessment. And to your point, critical thinking is at the heart of that, right? So it's a new way of teaching, a new way of educating, a new way of assessing. But to Ivan's point, looking into the future, we need to be doing that not just at third level, right, but from from primary school up, right, and engendering that understanding of these tools, some understanding in any discipline of how they work, including their potential pitfalls, and sensitizing people to their use. In terms of the other education piece I wanted to say was, and it speaks directly to how do we help SMEs, right? I think we need to start looking at our PhD talent pool differently with a view to educating them with transversal skills so they can seamlessly transition into industry, but also with entrepreneurial training so that they can become the innovators of the future. That has been trialled on a relatively limited basis in Ireland, and it's been hugely successful. We just need more of it across all disciplines.
And to maybe give an example of what that looks like, we've got data which is showing that, and I'm not going to name the college, generic computer science course, struggling. No, I'm not going to. I know you're trying to get me into trouble. It's not DCU. I would want to emphasize that it is not Trinity. That they are struggling to put generic computer science interns into placements. And yet you have, and I know DCU had a model similar to what UL are now doing with the immersive software engineering, which are listening to industry. They are trying to teach things differently. They're embracing the use of AI, and they have a near 100% not only intern placement record, but also a higher record after that. The final thing, because we are very focused on computer science for the last couple of minutes, is if you extrapolate that, what's already happened in computer science and tech jobs is coming for every single professional services jobs. And we have use cases and videos and demos to put that. So in that context, it's our duty as an agency, but also society, to educate people, to give them the heads up. But also, given that every company is becoming more of a software company, there's a role for open source in that. It's not just for the tech companies anymore.
And what can we do? Because I still think it's a bit of a cult. Sorry. What can we do to tell the story in an inclusive way that allows every organization, commercial and otherwise, access that capability? Because it's often produced and within the tech sector as it's an elite sport, right? Or then you need a computer science degree. Now, I mean, I can use Claude. I'm not stupid, but I'm not a techie either. It is an accessible skill that is, and now we kind of bring, oh yes, but then you can create this wonderful kumbaya open source arrangement as well. Like, where's the commercial reality attached to that?
So we essentially sell open source software, and what that means is we productionize and harden it and make it available for people to use. But the beauty of open source is it's an innovation hub where millions and millions of developers are working on code, and it's open. It's free to use. It's free to see. It's free to see what data your models have been trained on. You're not dependent on it. So if you go to and I don't mean to name them defensively, an AWS or a Microsoft or other, you're dependent on them, and you don't know how this application has been built. You don't know what data it's been trained on. With open source, you see exactly what it's been trained on, and there's no dependency. That for me is the key thing.
And I think from when we look at an industry perspective, one of the things we're seeing a huge amount is now with the growth of open source AI models that's coming out there, it's making it for a lot of small businesses like a really great opportunity to come up with it. For an entrepreneur or somebody with a business idea, they can now take an open source model, an AI model, they get all the functionality that's in there with it. It allows them to start thinking differently, new types of business ideas that's coming up. I'm probably criticized being too optimistic. I'm always kind of looking that side of us there. But like for me, if you look at what the landscape is now doing and the potential that's come out there with using open source in a way and merging that with AI, there's a lot of opportunity now, particularly for SMEs to scale up, which is one way, because one of the biggest challenges you always have as a small business is how do you compete with the larger multinationals who have the resources that are there within it. And so using that to scale up is definitely some opportunity. But on the other side of it then, when you've got with the multinationals, how are they going to compete and grow and maintain that? Because they have to change their operational model that's there now. The traditional way is like, well, I'll hire another 1,000 software engineers. That's not the future. The future now we're seeing with companies is like, I've got really good talent. I need to keep them. I have to retrain them. I have to look at something differently. And I think from a lot of that perspective, it's not just all about going to be the new jobs. It's going to be about the reskilling, the new types of work that people will be doing, and what opportunities then they can do to create that faster.
And if I can, you jump in there,
Paul. Sorry. I can't overstate the community element of open source. If you look on the internet at how many meetups are run in Dublin for open source technologies, Kubernetes, whatever it is, Kafka, the whatever. And it's really about people helping each other. So
can I just ask that question though? Because we live in these interesting geopolitical times where we've seen that integrated supply chains, for example, have been weaponized. Is there a danger that really strong community, be it on this island or off it, can also be weaponized?
Well, it could. So the problem that we have, like if you look at sovereignty as an example, right? So my sovereignty today could mean I'm happy for my data to live in Ireland, England, Finland, China. I might not be friends with Finland tomorrow. So it's a very uncertain, moving kind of feast. So 100% there's an exposure there, but it's how do we manage that? I'm not 100% sure.
And if I can pick up on that, the sovereignty question, and it's something that we've been thinking about for a while, but in a different context, where if you're a small to medium business, there is a possible future where instead of the current large language models being available for nearly free, that they have to raise the prices just to pay for the cost of electricity going in it. So I'm quoting Patricia Scanlon, who's Ireland's AI ambassador, in a slightly different context, in that you always want to have the choice of your LLMs, and open source enables that. And as part of the education that we're trying to do with the companies, is to get them thinking that. But the other point I want to make is when it comes to the kind of the barrier to entry to open source, and this is why I'm delighted that you're doing the panel, is that pretty much every other person in this room has passed the threshold of being involved in open source. Is, you need to know what it is, certain amount of technical knowledge, you need to know what GitHub is. With the new, so Kathryn, fair play to you for doing the panel, but equally in the new world with the AI tools coming along, that dramatically lowers the barrier for anybody. And I know you have a technical background as well. It dramatically lowers the barrier. And that's really important when we have architects and lawyers and accountants coming into the open source world. So that's one of the things I'm excited about.
Yeah, thank you. And Kathryn, you're first. I think you led off this part of the discussion by talking about the economic benefit or the economic dividend. I mean, there's also a social imperative here, right, that we shouldn't forget and that I have to represent as the academic on the panel, right? But you think about open source, and particularly in the context of AI and the potential benefits to society. Well, number one, it enables faster progress because we're building on top as opposed to reinventing the wheel. Okay, it broadens access to researchers, to startups, to students. It lends itself to transparency so that we can understand the inherent biases in these models, and it allows us, to prototype quickly based on customization, right? And that's all really positive. I suppose where you start to get concerned then is the fact that these things are very powerful. They are open source. The potential for them to be used for sinister purposes is huge, particularly if they're released without any guardrails. And one thing that I sometimes get peeved about is people talk about open source as some kind of great democratization of technology. It is in part, right? But in the context of AI, these things still need to be trained, right? And open sourcing them doesn't make GPUs any more accessible or any cheaper. So I think open source is not just about supercharging our economy and SMEs. It is, but it's also good for our society if we can get it right.
And the getting it right part is part policy and part practice. And we've seen the rapid development in the last 18 months is head spinning, really, in terms of what has come to the market in a retail way, shall we say. It's not just sitting in a kind of obscure techie stack. The policy is playing catch up, and it looks like it's going to be playing permanent catch up. What principles or guardrails can we build? Because we've seen, even in the last number of weeks, significant challenges around personal safety that have come up. And now there's been strong governmental reactions across Europe. Sometimes in other jurisdictions, it's framed as an attack on free speech. But talking about physical safety is a government's first job. Never mind economic anything. Where can we strike a balance between policy and protections? We all need guardrails, and keeping innovation moving.
We did, sorry, first. We did a really interesting webinar the week before last on the EU AI Act, and we're getting a lot of questions from this. And whatever your opinion on the Act, most companies welcome that because it did give a level of these are the rules that we need to follow in Europe. And obviously being an export agency, the next question was, well, if you have to follow the rules in Europe, how does that going to impact when you're trying to sell in the US? And most of the reaction that we were getting back was a positive thing, because if you're an Irish company selling into the US, you cannot be the lowest cost supplier. You just can't do it because you've got local guys that are going to be able to undercut you. So if you're aiming for quality, then having the EU rules is almost a mark of the way that you're going to treat your customers' data with respect as well. So it's not directly answering your question, but I think there are a lot of positives in there in the current landscape.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when I think about where we are at the moment with AI, it's a little bit like, pre-GDPR, right? When it was the Wild West with data, right? And then GDPR came along and put manners on us all. And lo and behold, it wasn't, the doomsday we thought it was going to be. We'll never be able to do any data-related research again. You will. You'll just be able to do it ethically and safely and all the rest of it. And that's what's missing, right? The advent of something like a GDPR for AI at the moment. And the challenge there is that technology is moving so quickly. Europe is moving so slowly, quite honestly. So go back to your opening statement, Kathryn. I think this is an opportunity for Ireland to be brave, to move quicker, to ask for perhaps forgiveness rather than permission, right? Because otherwise, as you say, the policy, the legislation is going to be light years behind this technology constantly.
One of the things we must do is there's a requirement under the EU AI Act to build a regulatory sandbox for organisations to test their applications in. Where is it? like myself and my co-founders in AI Squared have looked at this in great detail. There's legislation there. Somebody needs to turn that into a technical specification to build a sandbox. It's pretty simple, but somebody needs to do it. And until we have that, at the very least, there's a massive risk exposure there.
I feel a job coming on.
I did it before for open banking, so I might do it here.
I would agree with that. Like, I think the sandbox things is really important for what unique companies do to be able to explore together. And what also that allows then within a sandbox environment is you have a huge opportunity for collaboration in a different way, either be it startups with the multinationals or even just startups working together. In terms of regulation, for my sins from reading the multiple versions of the EU AI Act and contributing into it over the year, like fundamentally, I think what we're seeing as well from industry that I'm seeing, like, at least with the larger companies, it's really interesting. If you're looking at the consumer tech kind of market, it's like go fast and just go out and do that and get it quick to market and, you know, worry about what comes after. But if you look at enterprise clients, enterprise SaaS, you look at financial services, you look at medtech, which is now moving into that, they want regulation in the sense that they're, because like fundamentally, as one or two companies said, like, you know, if we release something and it goes wrong, well, that's our whole industry is gone reputation wise. So I think like there's a view out there that like nobody wants regulation, but that's not true. Like the regulation actually can help it drive a lot of innovation within it. But there's always going to be outliers who will always like not want the regulation. That's always going to be the case, no matter what sector you're in. But I think what we're starting to see we're going to start seeing the software sector particularly bringing into regulation for the first time. So life sciences, you know, chemistry, engineering, they've all got regulation that are there. Now we're going to start seeing software starting to come into that field for the first time, into more of a structured approach. The balance is like not having too much regulation with where it is, and where that sweet spot is very up for debate between a lot of people. But I do think that the regulation does allow for a lot of opportunities at the moment in terms of innovation.
Okay. If the Taoiseach's sitting there and you had one thing to say to him, what would you say? 30 seconds.
Get the finger out.
Beyond that, with one suggestion.
Honestly, we've seen the AI Act, the AI Act refreshed and refreshed and refreshed. And the AI Advisory Council advise, and there's been no action.
Okay.
No action. And we can't wait for this. We cannot wait for it.
No.
Talent. Invest in talent. That's been the secret of Ireland's success for many, many years. It's why we have such great FDI here. And now we need to invest, double down on that and invest at talent at all levels, not just a third level, but masters, postgraduate, PhD level, postdoctoral level, and equip them not just with the tech skills, right, but to your opening point, to the skills that enable them to become future entrepreneurs, future innovation leaders.
I'd say not to be afraid to leverage Ireland's strengths. We're a country of 5-6 million people, and that's a unique advantage because we can pull AI people, technical people, we can pull in lawyers into the same room. We can make decisions quickly when we want to, but equally in terms of generating startups from that, some of the most interesting startups that we're seeing are because those people from different domains got into the room together. So leverage what we have. There's a lot of good things to build on.
So from my perspective, it would be all about investing in R&D. Like, if we're not doing that, you're not... Sorry, yes, indeed. That is very important in the current scheme, is there? But like, to me, like, unless we're moving to a knowledge economy, we already know that has now accelerated in the last 18 months. So like, from my message will be, you're doubling down on investment, you're doubling down on the research and investment in innovation and education, and that really is the path forward. Without that, we're going to fall behind. So we need to embrace it and do it. And open source is a great way to accelerate that as well, coupled with that investment. That would be my way.
Thank you, everybody. My lovely panelists, Ivan Jennings, John Durcan, Noel O'Connor, Paul Browne. Thank you all very much.